Welcome to the Covert Narcissism Podcast. I'm your host, Renee Swanson. I am not a therapist, and you are not a victim. What do you say to your adult child when the truth would validate your entire lived experience, but speaking it out loud somehow feels like you are hurting them being your child? How do you answer their questions about the parent who emotionally injured you and, in fact, them without becoming the villain in a story that someone else is already working on rewriting? This is one of the hardest parts of healing after covert narcissistic abuse, finding a language that is honest without being harmful. It's truthful without turning into a badmouther. It's supportive without pulling your children into the middle of everything. Because when you've lived in a backwards world, the backwards world of covert narcissistic abuse, it is almost impossible to talk about the truth without running the risk of sounding like you're attacking them. And especially when your children, they were raised inside of that dynamic too, and this is their parent that you now sound like you are attacking. Now, some of you have kids who have already woken up. They see it for what it is. Some of you have kids who are still loyal to the narcissistic parent. Some of you have kids that think you're being the difficult one, that you're, the problem because you left. Many of you have kids that are caught in that confusing middle space where they sense that something is off, but they can't quite articulate it at this point in their life. Today, we're going to talk about how to support your young adult child in a way that is truthful, grounded, loving and caring, boundary centered, without bad mouthing the other parent. And we're going to do it through examples, real stories, and practical language that you can use starting now. Welcome back to the Covert Narcissism Podcast, where we talk about how to be a steady, healing presence for your young adult child without bad mouthing their other parent. If you have ever felt misunderstood, judged, dismissed, or worried about what to say, then this episode is for you. Now let's start here. You do not have to lie to protect your child. You also do not have to attack the other parent in order to tell the truth. There is a middle ground, and that middle ground is your lived experience. Let me start by giving you a story. A woman that I worked with, I'm going to call her Amy, she shared a moment with her 22-year-old son. He came home after a tense conversation with his father, and he asked Amy, "Mom, was Dad always this way, or is he just different now?" Now, in that moment, she wanted to say, "Yes, he has always been this way. You just couldn't see it." But instead, she stayed grounded and rooted in herself, and she just said, "I can't speak for who he has been and is to you. I can't answer for that. But I can tell you that in my experience, there were patterns that have left me feeling small and unseen for a long time." Now, her son in this situation did not get defensive. He didn't shut down, and he didn't feel the pressure to choose sides or to get protective. He just nodded and said, "Yeah, that's how I felt today, too." Because she didn't attack, she just owned her truth. You see, you can support their feelings without creating a narrative. Your children may come to you with confusion, anger, loyalty, guilt, questions about what's normal. You're going to get all kinds of things. Your job is not to shape their opinion of that other parent. Your job is simply to hold space for them, for their questions and their feelings. I'll give you another example. Let's say your daughter says to you, "Well, Mom, Dad says you're too sensitive." Now, the old you might have jumped all over that in full-on defensive reactive mode. "No, I'm not sensitive. Your dad is emotionally abusive." And there's a part of you that's justified in wanting to scream that. But I'm going to tell you, this is not going to help. And it, in fact, makes you look guilty already. The healthier, more grounded version of you can say something like, "I am sensitive. This is actually a strength in my life. You are allowed to decide for yourself how you see me." Now, notice you didn't attack the other parent. You didn't betray yourself. You didn't deny their reality. You allowed all of that to stand together in one place. So you didn't try to create a new narrative. You didn't deny what, the dad had said about you being sensitive. No, you actually just stood in your own truth. You simply modeled emotional awareness, genuineness, and even maturity. I want to share another story here. One client's daughter shut down anytime the word divorce came up. Mom wanted to be able to have these conversations with her young adult daughter, but her daughter simply wasn't open to it. Well, instead of forcing the conversation or slipping into explanation mode or defending her choice to divorce, the mom did learn to say, "Hey, that's okay. We don't have to talk about anything before you're ready. I am here, and I love you whether we talk about it or not." A few months later, her daughter actually came back to her and said, "I think I'm ready now." Her daughter just needed to do it on her time. And safety keeps that door open. Pressuring them shuts the door. If you push and pressure and try to force these young adult children to talk about things they're not ready to talk about, that door is going to shut. Sometimes all they want to know is that they are safe to decide when they talk about stuff and when they're not. You can be that safe presence to them. When you're trying to support your young adult child without criticizing the other parent, one of the most effective approaches is to shift the focus away from that parent's behavior and actually onto the core values that define healthy relationships. Your children don't need a character sketch of who this other parent is. They already know it. They might not know how to verbalize it, but they are already aware. Instead, they need a roadmap for what emotional health actually looks like. By grounding your conversations in principles such as respect, accountability, emotional safety, honesty, you teach them how to evaluate relationships for themselves. And isn't this what we want for them? The beauty of this approach is that it tells the truth without ever pointing a finger. The value speaks for itself, and over time, your children will naturally begin to notice where those values were missing and where they were upheld. It's one of the most powerful tools you can use. So instead of saying your father was controlling, you say healthy relationships include room for both people's feelings. Instead of saying your mother gaslit me, you can say, hey, no one gets to rewrite your reality, even someone you love. Instead of saying he never apologized, you say accountability is a cornerstone of emotional safety and allows a relationship to grow. There was a young adult son who told his mom, "Mom, Dad is just stressed. That's why he talks to you that way, and you take it too personally." Instead of arguing, and the tendency there would be to react to that, to argue, "Your dad does not have a right to talk to me that way." No. Instead of arguing, she took a step back and just simply said, in healthy relationships, stress is never an excuse to belittle someone. Everyone gets stressed, but not everyone uses it as a reason to be mean. Words still matter. She didn't have to say, your father belittles me, he's emotionally abusive. The principal did the talking for her. And later, months later, he came back to her. He said, Mom, I heard him talk to his girlfriend like that. I finally get what you mean. For every parent who feels misunderstood or unfairly judged by their own children, this next piece is especially for you. When an ex has twisted the narrative, distorted your intentions, launched a quiet smear campaign against you, it is almost instinctive to want to jump in and defend yourself, to clarify, to correct, to offer context, to finally lay everything out in a way that makes sense. That urge does not come from ego. It comes from pain. It comes from being misunderstood for years. It comes from the agony of being painted as someone that you never were. It comes from the desperate desire for your children to know your heart. This is the part that hits so hard because you know the truth of who you are, and yet your children may only know the version of you that was handed to them by someone who needed you to look like the problem. Now, here's the hard, liberating truth. Your children do not need a transcript of what really happened. Instead, they need the lived evidence of who you are right now. Young adult children don't heal through explanations. They heal through watching your steadiness. They watch your patterns. They absorb your tone. They listen. They notice whether life makes sense with you or whether every moment feels tense and unpredictable. What reassures them most is not a well delivered defense. It's your consistency. It's your calm, your emotional regulation, your willingness to stand still in your truth without scrambling to make everyone believe you. Stop defending yourself. When someone defends themselves, they already look guilty. Not because you are, but because defending carries this energy of desperation. And desperation is easily misinterpreted. It takes tremendous growth, maturity, and self trust to stop defending yourself, especially when someone has spent years shaping a narrative in which everything is your fault. But the moment that you learn to let life speak for itself, everything begins to shift. I'll give you an example. Your child says, Dad said you overreacted all the time. Well, the old you, the wounded, blamed, exhausted version, might have said, he always said that because he's the problem. And you would go on that line of defending and explaining. But the grounded, healing version of you takes a breath and says, I can understand why he would say that. I have had times of reacting. What I can tell you now is that I've worked really hard to understand my own emotions and to respond instead of react. I want you to feel safe with me. This is no defensiveness, no counterattack, no narrative correction, just calm truth from your side of the street. Another example might be when your child says to you, Mom said that you were impossible to talk to. Instead of responding with, she's the one who's impossible. You have no idea what I went through trying to talk to her. No, that is defensive and reactive, and your child will not benefit from that. Instead, try something like, I can see how she might feel that way. What I've learned about myself is that I communicate best when things are calm and respectful. I'm quite willing to have conversations that are honest and kind, and I want you to experience that with me. This response does several powerful things. You didn't attack the other parent. You didn't take the bait of the accusation. You show your child what real communication sounds like. You demonstrate emotional safety instead of trying to prove it. And again, your child will notice that the way you actually communicate doesn't match the story that they've been told. Over time, your steady presence becomes undeniable evidence, evidence that will eventually they will trust far more than anyone else's words. What people see over time always speaks louder than what anyone says in the moment. Your child will begin to notice, often slowly, quietly, and only internally at first, that your behavior doesn't match the story they were told about you. You don't have to chase their understanding. In fact, doing so again makes you look desperate. You just have to keep showing them who you really are. Add to this, giving them the freedom to think for themselves. Children who grow up with a covert narcissistic parent often learn very early that their thoughts aren't really their thoughts. Their opinions aren't their own opinions. Their emotional reactions are constantly monitored, corrected, and redirected to keep the peace. They learn that loyalty is expected, honesty is risky, and questioning the narrative comes with consequences. And when the healthier parent is doing everything possible to avoid conflict, these kids rarely see a model of someone who says, hey, you get to decide for yourself. So when these children become young adults, they often carry this internal pressure to pick a side, to defend someone, to agree with someone, or to manage someone's emotions. None of that leaves space for their own independent mind. One of the most healing gifts that you can give them now is the freedom to think for themselves, the freedom to question, to hold their own perspective without fear, the freedom to not choose sides, to not defend you or the other parent, the freedom to have their own experience, their own perspective. Because unlike the covert narcissist, you're not trying to recruit them into your narrative. You're simply trying to help them reclaim their own voice, giving them permission to do just that.
Support for this podcast is brought to you by Walden University. Ever catch yourself thinking, what if I could go after what I actually want and really make a difference? You're not alone, and that's exactly why I want to tell you about Walden University. For over 50 years, Walden has helped working adults like you get the W with the knowledge and skills to build the future you want and make a difference where it matters most. If you've been waiting for the right moment, this is it. Head to waldenu.edu and take that first step. Walden University. Set a course for change, certified to operate by Chev.
Becomes one of the most powerful ways that you actually break this generational pattern without ever saying a negative word about the other parent. I had a client recently who had two daughters. One saw the narcissistic abuse very clearly and aligned with, this parent. The other defended her dad fiercely. Instead of trying to convince the second daughter, the mom simply said to her, "Hey, you're allowed to have your own perspective. It's okay. I'm not going anywhere." A year went by, and the daughter who had been defending her dad said, "Hey, mom, I'm starting to see things differently." You see, freedom creates movement. It gives breathing space. Pressure, pressure creates resistance. If that client had pressured her daughter to understand and to get it and to see reality before the daughter was ready, it would have created more resistance in that daughter. There is a misconception that supporting your young adult child means staying completely silent about the past. And that is not true. It's as if the only way to avoid badmouthing the other parent is to say nothing at all. But silence can add to the confusion that they're already experiencing. It can invalidate a child who is finally trying to understand their own upbringing. You don't have to dump all the truth on them. In fact, I would say don't do that. You don't have to expose every detail that they never knew. But you also don't have to hide from the questions that they are directly asking you. What your children need in these moments is grounded truth. Truth that speaks from your experience without attacking or diagnosing the other parent. The key here is talk about the impact, not the identity. Talk about your feelings, not the other parent's flaws. Talk about the dynamics, not the accusations. This approach allows your child to understand the emotional reality without feeling like they're being pulled into a war. If your child is asking you, "Why did you leave?" this is one of the biggest questions that adult children eventually ask, and it does deserve an honest, steady answer. You might be tempted to say, "Because your mom or your dad is a covert narcissist," and I would not do that. I don't think that's going to get a very good response from your child. Instead, a powerful, grounded response sounds like, "I left because the dynamics in the relationship were not healthy for me anymore." That's it. It's a simple response. It's mature. It's honest. It communicates the truth without assigning blame or demanding that the child, adopt your interpretation. It also gives them permission to feel their own feelings about the situation without feeling responsible for yours. If they're asking you, "Were you unhappy all those years?" this question can feel like it carries the full weight of all of their childhood, all of the past. Your child isn't just asking about your marriage, they're asking about the foundation of their own life. So your answer needs honesty and reassurance. Instead of saying, "Yes, I was miserable," or "I was drowning," or anything like that, how about an answer like, "There were parts of the marriage that were very painful for me. But your dad and I, or your mom and I, we also had some good times. There were moments of connection, joy, and real effort, and those parts mattered too. I did my best to create stability and love for our family, even when things were hard." Leaving wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing a healthier future. This kind of answer does several important things. It acknowledges the presence of good memories without rewriting the harm. Your children need to know that not their entire childhood was bad. It reassures your child that their childhood wasn't built on a lie. It prevents them from feeling trapped between idealization and total rejection. It teaches them that relationships can contain both meaningful moments and real pain. It models emotional complexity, something the children of covert narcissists rarely see. Most importantly, it shows your child that truth doesn't have to be black and white. You can honor the good that existed and still honor yourself for leaving what was no longer healthy. This grounded truth builds trust, and trust creates the space where deeper healing can finally begin. Kids who grow up with a covert narcissistic parent rarely witness the core skills that make relationships safe and healthy. These skills were not modeled in their home, so they didn't become part of their emotional vocabulary. What they did see was walking on eggshells, power imbalances, emotional withdrawal, silent treatment, blame shifting, or a parent that worked endlessly to keep the peace. What they didn't see: mutual respect, accountability, repair after conflict, emotional regulation, healthy boundaries, and two-way communication. So now, as young adults, they're stepping into this world without the toolkit that they actually need. And this is where you come in. They don't need a lecture about what healthy looks like, they need to experience it. They don't need you to tell them what it is, they need to feel what it is. So, one mom shared with me a moment that changed everything in her relationship with her daughter. See, mom had snapped earlier in the day. Nothing major, just a stressed, curt response. But later she came back and said, "I'm sorry I snapped at you earlier. It wasn't okay, and I'm working on managing my stress better." Her daughter froze, stared at her, and then said quietly, "Wow, Dad never apologizes for anything." In that moment, without ever mentioning the other parent, without the mom ever mentioning, the contrast spoke loudly. Her daughter learned more about healthy communication in that single apology than in years of watching the unhealthy dynamic in their home. This is what truth looks like without explanation. This is modeling instead of teaching. This is demonstrating instead of defending. I recently had a client in tears telling me, "I feel so bad for my son. He never got to see a healthy relationship, and now he's struggling. He doesn't know what healthy even looks like, and I couldn't show him that in my home, in my relationship with his father." She was grieving like so many of us, not just because of what she had endured, but because of what her child had missed out on. She felt guilty, responsible, afraid that she had not done enough to help her kid, afraid of what he might go forward and be in a future relationship. But I told her something. I said, "You need to now be that healthy relationship in his life. Be that safe person, open, honest, genuine. Be non judgmental. Be reciprocal. Let him learn a healthy relationship through the one he's having with you." You see, prior to this, she had been reactive toward him, frustrated with the choices he was making in life, like so many of us are when we've got kids in their young 20s. She was quick to correct him, desperate to push him towards something that she thought is what he needed and what healthy should look like. But something clicked in her when she realized he doesn't need correction, he needs connection. He needs a safe relationship, and you can now be that. He needs to know what emotional honesty looks like, what accountability sounds like, what boundaries feel like, what repair means and feels, what a calm nervous system feels like in another person. This is the relationship that will teach him everything that he didn't see growing up. Children of covert narcissists didn't grow up seeing healthy relationship skills, but they can still learn them. And they learn them best from you right now. You modeling emotional safety. You modeling communication with respect, repair without shame, boundaries without punishment, truth without drama, love without conditions. And slowly they begin to internalize this is what healthy feels like. You are teaching through your presence, not your explanations, through your steadiness, not your defenses, through your relationship with them now, not the one that they witnessed then. This is how generational patterns break, not through blame, but through modeling something better. You need to also let them see you heal. One of the greatest gifts you can give your adult child is not an explanation of your past, it's a transformation of your present. When they see you calmer, clearer, more grounded, happier, living again, choosing peace, enforcing boundaries with empathy, honoring your own worth, they learn that healing is possible. A 24-year-old daughter once told her mom, "Mom, watching you laugh again helped me understand how much you were holding in for all those years. Your healing tells the truth without you ever naming the villain. You don't have to say a word in order for them to see that. Your children may not understand today. They may even be angry with you. They may defend the very person who has hurt you. But here's what I can tell you. After working with thousands of survivors, truth has a long shelf life. Lies expire quickly, but reality will rise to the surface, not because you push it there, but because you live it. Your steadiness is the anchor. Your calm is the evidence. Your healing is the testimony. Stay the course. Supporting your young adult child is one of the most sacred and challenging journeys you'll ever take after leaving an emotionally abusive relationship. But you can do it with truth, integrity, and hope. Your children do not need you to badmouth the other parent. They need you to be the safest person in their world. Then that's exactly what you're becoming. I wish you and your child so much peace on your journey of healing. You have been listening to the Covert Narcissism Podcast, where we break apart the insidious nature of these incredibly destructive and infinitely frustrating individuals. If you are caught up in this crazy making relationship and drowning in self doubt, guilt, or rumination, please reach out to me anytime. I offer individualized live coaching in both group and individual settings. We can find the right program for you. You do not need to go through this alone. You can find all of that information on my website at covertnarcissism.com. You can also reach out to me by email at Renee, RENEE, at covertnarcissism.com. I do look forward to hearing from each and every one of you. Remember, I am not a therapist, and you are not a victim. I am a coach, and you are a survivor. The information provided by Renee Swanson, Covert Narcissism Podcast, and CNG Life Coaching is for educational purposes only and is not to be used for diagnosis purposes. It is not intended to be a substitute for clinical care. Please consult a healthcare provider for guidance specific to your case. This material discusses narcissism in general. Renee shares stories from her personal experience as well as from those that she has worked with for several years. Her material does not claim that any specific person has narcissism and should not be used to refer to any specific person as having narcissism. Permission is not granted to link to or repost this material to support an allegation or support a claim that any specific person is a narcissist. That would be an unauthorized misuse of the material and the information provided. Thank you.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.